Good afternoon. We're here today with Comrade Prakash Karat at the 23rd Karnataka State Party Conference of the Communist Party of India Marxist. And on this occasion, we'd just like to ask him a few questions regarding certain contemporary and future political developments. Thank you, Comrade, for being here. So I would like to start off first with some contemporary developments in world politics. It's particularly heartening to see the rise of the left and left government formations in many countries, particularly in South America, in Brazil and now in Chile. So what do you think are some of the lessons that holds for the CPM as well as the broader left in India today?
Well, what has been happening in Latin America is a complex process. More than 2 decades ago, a strong left trend emerged in Latin America, backed by the struggles against the neoliberal policies and against imperialist interventions in various countries to establish the hegemony of US imperialism. Those struggles, which related to also people's lives, like water privatization, there was a big struggle in some countries, electricity privatization, and putting up rates for all utilities. All these were taken up and big struggles were launched. And as a result, we saw by the turn of the century the emergence of left-led governments or left-oriented governments, most significant of which was the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela, where you had a government headed by Hugo Chavez. And along with that, then you saw Bolivia, you saw Ecuador, Nicaragua, all these countries having left-led governments. And they tried to put in place pro-people policies and some alternative to the neoliberal policies. But this was not a smooth process. You'll see a decade later that the right-wing forces backed by American imperialism intervened and sought to roll back this left wave. It was called the pink tide in those days. And there was a counter-offensive. And you saw that, you mentioned Brazil, which had Lula as the president, followed by Dilma Rousseff. She was toppled, and an extreme right-wing government of Jair Bolsonaro is now in power. You see, he is called the Trump of Brazil. You see, so extreme right. So you had a reversal, and you had a reversal again in countries like Ecuador, which had a left-oriented president, but after his terms was over, 2 terms, the new president took a rightward turn. Lenin Moreno. Name is Lenin, but he has nothing to do with Lenin. So a rightward turn, and he has reversed all the progressive policies of the earlier government. So you have this ding-dong battle. In some countries, the left goes ahead, then it sometimes gets pushed back, then it comes back again. And we are seeing now, as against the first wave and the counter-offensive of the right, again the left is coming back, a resurgence. And the most significant in this second round is that in Bolivia, where in 2019 there was a coup, and Morales was ousted. President Morales, who had won the election, they claimed it's a fake election and the armed forces intervened. A year later, they could not sustain this, they had to hold elections, and the MAS, which is the party of Morales, the Movement for Socialism, they have come back with a big majority. So you could see the counter-offensive and then the reversal again in Bolivia, which is a very significant thing. And now the latest is in Chile. Chile was the country where neoliberalism was first experimented after the Pinochet coup. And 50 years later, you have now, for the first time, a left candidate winning the election, that to a 35-year-old former student leader. What this signifies is that the processes which have been on in Latin America have been much deeper than what the electoral trend showed. Because electoral victories and failures can go on.
Correct.
But in Latin American societies, you have actually found the struggles against neoliberalism, struggles against imperialist hegemony, and the struggles for social justice have struck deep roots. They cannot be eliminated just by any electoral maneuver or by some putsch or a coup anymore. So the resurgence of the left again, the last 3 election victories have been Peru, Honduras, Chile. All 3 countries have had authoritarian regimes, have had a history of military interventions and coups and extreme violence also, particularly in Honduras and Peru. But it is remarkable that in such countries which have no history of even what you might call parliamentary democracy, you have now left-oriented governments or presidents. So what does this mean for us? I think worldwide, of course, it is a great boost to the left and progressive forces. That there is one part of the world which was considered the backyard of the United States of America, which is overturning the old power correlations and hegemonies. And it is possible in the 21st century to fight back imperialist hegemony and also neoliberal policies through popular movements. They may not be the conventional form of left parties or communist parties, but these are parties and movements which have been thrown up through the popular struggles, you see. And there is a certain degree of experimentation also. If you look at the whole Venezuelan experience, Chavez first said no question of parties. You know, we are building a movement. This will continue to be a movement. Then later on he said no, we need a party to consolidate the gains. Then how to form a party? You see, the next stage of experimentation was to create a party out of the movement, and then came the interventions by imperialism and right-wing forces, and the alternative policies which they wanted to implement have got stuck because of the blockade, sanctions, and right-wing destabilization efforts. So it is not easy. You can win an election, but it's not easy to put in alternative policies and continue on a path of being independent or autonomous of imperialism. That's where the crunch comes. So in all these countries, I am saying they are in the second stage now. They know they can win elections. But after winning elections, running governments and putting in alternative policies, that stage is now where we are finding ups and downs. I think for India, this in some way relates to our experience, in the sense where the left could run state governments. We could win elections, run state governments, but after a certain period of time, because of very limited powers of the states in our system, you are in a position where it's not possible to make any more radical breakthroughs. You see. You won't be allowed to do it. Neither is the financial and economic powers and structures allow states to go beyond a certain limit, and the constitutional limits also. So, learning from the South American experience, I think in India we have to learn to put in place some alternative policies. You see, you cannot say you win an election and say now, sorry, till the system changes, till the bourgeois landlord structure changes, we can't do anything. So then why are you in government then? Okay. So you have to remain in government and keep trying to push for alternative policies to the extent possible. And in that process, you develop again mass struggles and movements for implementing alternative policies. And you may lose elections. And not only elections will be lost because of you lost a popular vote. You can lose elections because you will the elections can be intervened and illegal methods can be used. Violence can be unleashed against you, as is happening in West Bengal and Tripura, where they would not allow you to have a democratic, normal process of election. You have to face that also.
Correct.
So, like I said, in Bolivia they were overthrown and force was used, but they were able to come back. So, we have to learn from this that being in a state government does not give you protection from illegal methods of trying to undermine you or violent methods undermine you. So we have to now think about some experience of the Latin American would help us to look to the post left front government's phase. You see, how do we rebuild the movement and develop struggles which will help us to overcome these ruling class attacks on you. I think that's one of the key lessons we can draw from Latin America.
So actually two important threads that you brought up here. One is to have an alternate vision that one can build on, and second was about continuing with mass struggles whilst you're at it. So coming closer back home to India, where recently we have witnessed the rather successful farmers' agitation, which went well past a year with significant contribution from the All India Kisan Sabha and various different fractions representing different classes within Indian agriculture. So one of the questions that comes forward is beyond the immediate victories of the struggle, how does this translate to other questions with regards to Indian agriculture, and also maybe in terms of electoral victories or electoral strength in places where these farm laws became prominent?
You see, the farmers' movement, which has been a historic struggle in post-independent India, was pitted against a very strong government, a government which had, as you know, an absolute majority in parliament, which is determined to utilize all methods to push through its agenda. So it was a very unequal sort of fight, in the sense 3 farm laws, yes, they were passed undemocratically in parliament, but the government was, I think, confident that it has the resources and the powers to be able to push through and implement these 3 farm laws. I think what it did not expect was the type of mass upsurge which was witnessed in northwestern India. That is, the 3 states or 3 regions, that is Punjab, Haryana and Western UP. Now, as we all know, these are the 3 states which produce a surplus of food grains, and a bulk of the procurement is from these 3 places, 3 states. And it is the farmers from these 3 regions which, as I said, there was a mass upsurge, and all sections of the peasantry joined this struggle. So one was the unity of the mass of farmers belonging to different strata within the peasantry, from the poor farmers to the rich farmers, and given the unity, this also drew in the agricultural workers also into the struggle. And particularly in Punjab, it was not anymore a Kisan movement. It became all Punjab people's movement. It became the whole society was got involved in it. Now this made it in one sense impregnable, to usual wiles of the state, you see, of trying to divide, of trying to buy off one section or try to use caste or religion. All this could not work as far as Punjab was concerned. So to a lesser extent that unity was there in Haryana, of course, to a lesser extent, and Western UP. Now the social composition of Haryana and Western UP also, the dominant section in terms of caste in those areas, that bulk of that peasantry spearheaded this. You see. So it was difficult for the BJP and the government to counter this movement because I told the composition of this social composition of peasantry also made it difficult to divide or break up this movement. I think that is the kernel of the strength of this movement. And the fact that these were the states bordering Delhi and the movement was, focused on getting to Delhi, and therefore they could keep replenishing their forces. You see, you can't get people from Karnataka or Kerala to be there all the time. You see, so mobilization, the mass mobilization from the states actually bordering Delhi, and to some extent Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, the next category. Uttarakhand, of course, very small, but they were all there. But the core was this, and this gave the militant edge to the movement, and is the key to its sustainability. You see, you can't run this sort of mass sit-in or for well over a year without having this sort of constant supply of people. People are going, another batch would come, but then village by village they were mobilizing. So this sort of mass mobilization is what made it unique, you see, with something they could not really figure out how to divide. They tried everything, from the standard anti-national to Khalistani to all that they tried, but they could not break it. So I think the first lesson is that this sort of unity of the Kisans or peasantry is something which will make it a formidable force in future also, if such unity can be forged or sustained in the future. The second aspect is that because of the left's active intervention, though this was not a party-based movement, the left's intervention through its own Kisan organizations and the trade unions, right from the outset, there was unprecedented level of unity of Kisan and workers.
Correct.
Don't forget the first call for Delhi Chalo was launched before the Samyukt Kisan Morcha was formed by another organization which had been formed earlier, the Kisan Sangharsh Committee, after the Madhya Pradesh firings. You see. That gave the call for Delhi Chalo. On the day the trade unions had given a call for All India General Strike. You see, that's how the first struggle began on a joint action, and that unity was sustained throughout the year. There were 3 Bandh calls given by the Kisan organizations after the November 26th. The last being in December last year. In all those 3 Bandh calls, the trade unions actively supported or participated in some form or the other. So this worker-peasant united actions is the second aspect of showing that, you see, resistance to a policy by a section which is directly affected, if it draws in other sections who are also fighting on their own issues. They were fighting on the labor codes. They were fighting on the farmer laws. But there was a convergence or a united actions that I think has gave it a clear class direction also. That it is directed against the BJP government, which is a combination of Hindutva and corporates. So the anti-corporate thing came also from the Kisan movement, but it got a special edge from the working class action also, because it's also against privatization.
Correct.
All the working class actions in this 1 year was against privatization. So even in states far away from the center of the struggle, say Andhra Pradesh, you see, there were solidarity and protest mobilizing Kisan, but it was then coinciding with a very big anti-privatization struggle against the privatization of the Visakhapatnam steel plant, which became a mass movement in Andhra Pradesh. Now, this is another new feature that for the first time in our country, what might be called sectional demands of, say, trade unions or Kisan is acquiring a broader mass character. If you go to Andhra Pradesh, you will see, except for the BJP, every party supports this movement against privatization, including the ruling party there, the YSRCP. Nobody can oppose it because it's such a popular movement. So this, I think, the Kisan movement, on one hand, was the first struggle which succeeded in forcing the government to go back on its policies. Secondly, it has also shown the potential for a wider resistance and wider movement, combining worker, peasants and other sections to fight against, this is a political point I'm making, to fight against the Modi regime, which is representing the Hindutva corporate interests. Why Hindutva is important is, one of the reasons why the government repealed these laws is because of the forthcoming elections in Uttar Pradesh mainly, and to a lesser degree Punjab, because in Punjab they have been thoroughly isolated because of this movement. Politically already they are isolated. But in Uttar Pradesh, the Hindutva agenda which they are banking on, you see, polarization, anti-Muslim campaign, not only a hate campaign but have attacks on the minorities and create the type of polarization, that got overwhelmed or overshadowed by the unity forced through the Kisan struggle. In Western UP is a classic example where 2013 you had the Muzaffarnagar riots in September, which helped the BJP to sweep the 2014 elections in the same region for the first Lok Sabha election. So what you had was a blunting of that Hindutva weapon through the Kisan struggle, forging unity which was visible, in that region where the divide had been so much between the Jat peasantry and the Muslim peasantry. They came together, and the BJP then really felt shaken. They felt that this will harm them in the UP election, and they needed to get this issue out of the off the table. You see, immediately after that, they have stepped up their Hindutva communal propaganda and everything else. So the fight against the Hindutva corporate alliance and its agenda, I think the Kisan movement has given definitely a new direction and thrust to it.
So one of the other issues, in fact, something which you mentioned yesterday as well, is the fact that a lot of official public institutions, public spaces, whether it be elected members or even officials at different levels of government, are also openly sort of endorsing and supporting views which are blatantly communal and casteist. While this may have been also present in the past, it has become much more obvious now and blatant, so to speak. How is it that one looks at mass movements and struggles also tackling this issue?
You see, there are two processes at work. When you talk about official bodies and constitutional bodies, etc., that is from the top. You have subversion of the institutions under the constitution, subverting them in the sense of the formal character of those institutions, the formal appearance of those institutions remain, but from within its secular democratic character is subverted, and the Hindutva ideology gets infiltrated. This is happening in all the institutions of the state. The political executive, of course, is following the Hindutva agenda, but it is ensuring that the bureaucracy, the judiciary and the armed forces, the other wings of the state also fall in line with this. That process has been speeded up after the return of the Modi government in 2019. They are feeling more confident and more aggressive in this. While recognizing that this is happening from the top, that is from the political executive or political leadership, I think what we are underestimating is how much Hindutva is becoming the hegemonic idea in India. Those who are secular still think Hindutva is trying to break into this secular fortress, you see, and we have to just keep fending them off. You know, they are invaders, not realizing that among the people, in substantial number of people in large parts of the country have already bought into this Hindutva idea. And the consciousness of the people today, you can see it most visibly in places like Uttar Pradesh, in Madhya Pradesh, in Gujarat, various places in northern and western India. After years of work, it's not just suddenly because they won an election. They have been able to bring about a change in the consciousness of the people. So what we consider is against democracy and secularism is not how the people, many sections of people see it. They've already bought into the idea that, for example, nationalism. For them, nationalism means Hindu nationalism now. What Modi propagates, that is accepted as nationalism. So whenever they use the nationalist rhetoric, it also strengthens the communal consciousness. So that is what is the danger. That is, so if this is becoming, that's why I said it's becoming hegemonic, and that is reflecting in all the institutions of the state. You have a Supreme Court judge who's from Karnataka, by the way, Abdul Nazir. He recently gave a talk in Hyderabad where he says that we should Indianize the judiciary and we should look to Manu and Kautilya and all that. And in fact gives a quotation approvingly of saying that a murderer and a criminal and murder of Brahmin, all of them should be treated as equal crimes in severity. Now here's a Supreme Court judge openly propagating that the constitution should not be the basis for our judiciary, but it should be the ancient Hindu, what he terms the Hindu classics. So you have already this come into our system at various levels in a big way. So how to fight that? See, there my point is, we always talk about fighting neoliberal policies, taking up the issues of the people, their livelihood, problems of price rise, unemployment, all that is right. It is through this that we can counter the efforts to create communal divisions and to create and to stop the diversion of the people's views or interest into these lines. I think it is an inadequate way of looking at it now. You may draw in people in struggles on their day-to-day problems and issues, but they can still maintain a consciousness that we are all Hindus and Hindus must rule this country. You see, it both can go together.
Yeah.
So unless you carry on simultaneously a vigorous political ideological campaign along with this, when you see, you get the people on their issues, only then they come. But you must utilize the mobilization at that time to carry on side by side effective campaign to expose the reactionary nature of this ideology, how it will eventually harm your interests. You see, those who are talking about Hindus, they are not talking about you. You see, they are serving the interests of Hindus like Ambanis and Adanis, you see, not you, the worker and peasant. You have to put this across, you see, along with your economic struggles. But our intervention in the political ideological sphere against communalism and the Hindutva ideology is weak, inadequate, insufficient, and I'm afraid right now we are not making it comprehensible to the people. So a lot of work has to be put in this. And every struggle, every mass struggle, every economic struggle must have as a component campaign and exposure of the rulers. In Karnataka, you have a BJP government. If you fight on Manrega, you fight on land issue, you may fight on wages. But if you do not simultaneously carry out a campaign against the BJP government's Hindutva agenda here, and how that is going to be used to buttress their class interests and serve the corporates, etc. If you don't make that linkage, you're not going to politically wean them away from this or win them over to the secular democratic cause. This is the point I would like to stress. And if you carry on the struggle at the ground level, only then you can take up this question. Now, you see, we can go on saying, oh, it's unfortunate that the bureaucracy is getting infiltrated or the judiciary is behaving in this fashion, etc. But unless you get the masses onto your side, you cannot carry on the struggle at the level of the superstructure there.
Correct. Last question is dealing with the more contemporary issue in terms of the various state elections as well as the future Lok Sabha election which would take place. So you have still many parties which are trying to vie for being national in character beyond the Congress, even though they would be representatives of what we would refer to as the bourgeois landlord alliance. They nevertheless make claim to being a secular alternative. How do we see through this position of such parties and in this larger struggle against the current right-wing offensive that we have?
No, I think the emphasis at this time is not to see through or expose these parties. You see, it is to recognize the limitations and the defects of these parties and then see how they can be rallied. Because as of now, the left is a relatively weak force. The left is the most consistent in the fight against the RSS, BJP's politics and ideology. Most consistent does not mean we are the most powerful. You see, we are consistent, others are not consistent. You see, but those who are not consistent, those who are vacillating, those who are compromising, unless we draw them into this common struggle, it's not them. They have people with them. We want to build that unity of the people against this. So we have to draw them in. How to do that? Unfortunately, for these parties, their only aim is electoral. How to get to do well in elections and how to protect their electoral, gains or interests. So all these parties are maneuvering. None of them are very strong nationally. The Congress party, which was the premier national party of these ruling classes is today declined. But it's still the largest party, but not in a position to carry credibility and rally all of this. So, in that vacuum, many others are trying to fill the vacuum. But it's not easy and it's not going to succeed. Unless the realization comes that in each state, you have to try to build unity state-wise. In each state, there are different parties and correlation of forces between these parties. So you try to build unity of the anti-BJP forces to the widest extent possible state-wise. But at the national level, that sort of unity is not going to happen easily. Mechanically, it's not going to happen. What is required then is, according to us, the left understanding in this is, how do you build the widest unity against the BJP? That has to be done through developing the widest mass struggles and class struggles. The example is the farmers' struggle. Once the struggle became a mass struggle, it compelled many of the regional parties or bourgeois parties to support the struggle. Some of them had voted actually in support of the farm bills in Parliament. But BJD, YSRCP, when the Bandh calls were given by the farmers, they supported it. TRS, they came out actively in support. That's because the mass struggle had developed. So, developing mass struggles and movements will also is the way to draw some of these parties into a united platform. Without that, they will all maneuver against each other and try to outwit each other. But so the ability to develop mass struggles and movements will also determine the degree of unity possible among the opposition parties. The moment that struggles reach a tempo where it will affect national level, you see, like the farmer struggle affected at the national level. That's why all these parties, it was not just in Punjab or Haryana or UP, it had its impact on Andhra, it had its impact on Odisha, on Telangana, where the parties were not willing earlier to oppose these bills, but they all had to come out in opposition. So our stress would be that, and if you build that mass struggle and unity, you will create the anti-BJP atmosphere, because people have to be mobilized against the BJP. Once that happens, your job is easier. And there's no point in talking about omnibus unity at the national level. What does it mean? Most of these parties are based in one state. You can, for optics, you can say all these leaders have come on a stage together and hold hands and say. But in practice, there will be no all India BJP movement against the BJP. It will be state-wise. So it's important that the emphasis now should be for united struggles and broad platforms for mobilization of all anti-BJP forces on issues. You see, it could be workers' issue, farmers' issue, it can be attack on minorities, it can be question about the Hindutva's hate, politics or speech, whatever. You try to build the widest unity on that without looking at the electoral, calculations out of that. That is the path which should be taken. All other efforts, whether Mamata Banerjee is trying or so-and-so is trying, all that I think is going to be futile.
Okay, Kamad. So thank you for this, and